I am here today with Pat Harney, who is one of our violin players in the Longwood Symphony. Thanks for joining us, Pat. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do professionally, how long you've been in the orchestra? Give us a little background on you.
Sure. I'm a psychologist. I work at Cambridge Health Alliance in Cambridge. I run a training program for doctoral students in psychology. It's like the equivalent of a residency program for physicians. Cambridge Health Alliance is a public sector hospital. It serves a pretty underserved patient population. It's very diverse, and although I'm in the Department of Psychiatry, we've had a lot of kind of interdisciplinary work with patients who are suffering one way or another related to the COVID pandemic. I also have a psychotherapy practice where I meet with adults for psychotherapy treatment.
So I'm sure all of that looks a little different right now. How are you able to continue your work when we are all isolated?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Our department actually pivoted really quickly within a week to providing telehealth services. So we were able to set our patients up in different ways to be able to talk to their therapists and other healthcare providers over the phone, or using video-based platforms. I did the same in my psychotherapy practice. And I mean, it's a great benefit that we are able to reach people during times when we aren't supposed to be out and moving about, you know. At the same time, I and most of my colleagues agree that meeting with people over the internet is not the same as sharing a space with people, you know, and breathing the same air and feeling the wind get together. You know, it's a totally different experience, even though it's much better than not being able to do it at all. You know what I mean?
The same can be said about music. You know, we can listen to music and we can watch videos of people playing music, and it's just not the same as being in the room and actually feeling the vibrations of the music. There's nothing compares to that, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the same, like listening to my patients talk, you know, the sound of their voice is just different over this platform. Just like the sound of a violin playing is going to be distorted a little bit. Yeah.
So right now is a time of a lot of stress and anxiety for a lot of people. Is there anything that you would suggest or any advice you can give to kind of alleviate any of that when there's so much unknown?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of different kinds of difficult experiences that people are having, from grief, sort of traumatic grief, to anxiety related to job losses, to and the kind of anxiety and bad feelings that come from being alone and stuck inside. So I have thought ever since, you know, this pandemic started that the virus is the number one health threat, and then I felt like mental health issues were the number two concern. So you know, and concern for the general public, also concern for people who are doing healthcare work, frontline healthcare workers. My department chair gave a talk today, and he really took a different position in talking to our entire staff. He's been trying to be a really good cheerleader, you know, like let people know that he appreciates their stepping up, encouraging everyone to step up and do more work. And today he decided to talk instead about all the ways that he is struggling emotionally and the anxiety that he feels and the worry that he feels. And it was really moving. a lot of people in the healthcare community, I think, were really affected by news that happened over the weekend, where a emergency room doctor took her own life. She, by all reports, felt incredibly helpless about the work that she was trying to do, but felt ineffective in doing. And what was so moving from our department chair was his willingness to share his own vulnerability. And it's by, I really think, sharing our vulnerability that we're able to connect with people more deeply and kind of bridge those chasms that come up when we're all kept apart from each other. So finding ways to connect both with other people and also internally, to connect with ourselves at deeper levels. I think that's one of the things that I keep talking about with the people that I work with. So you probably have heard about mindfulness practices. It's a really sort of popular concept in psychology and education and healthcare now. And it can sound really simple, but I think there's a lot to it, and I think that there's a lot that it can offer people. So mindfulness is the practice of engaging your attention as deeply as possible in the present moment. It's pretty common that our minds wander really naturally, and that happens even more so when we're anxious and worried about things. And so what a mindfulness practice allows us to do is to exercise our attention like it's a muscle that we're building, to bring back to the present moment and notice everything that we're thinking and feeling and sensing. And there are a lot of ways to do that. There are sort of deliberate practices like yoga and meditation that allow us to do that. I like to practice what I call my drinking coffee in the morning meditation. I get a big cup of coffee. I don't read the newspaper. I don't listen to music. I don't look at anything except I stare out the window, drink my coffee, and watch the birds. So it can be as unstructured as that, or it could be a really deliberate kind of guided meditation. But there's a lot of scientific evidence now to show that mindfulness practices really do effectively reduce anxiety and have a very positive impact on physical health as well as emotional health. So there's not a lot that we can do in our present circumstances except kind of the jobs that we have and then go home, or we do our jobs from home. And I think about mindfulness as a really important way to take care of our physical and emotional selves, and that taking care of ourselves right now is a really important act of public service. So that's a little bit of what I spend time talking about with people. I tell my own patients I really try to practice what I preach, so that I can keep myself well, to take care of the people that I'm in charge of taking care of, whether it's my kids, my students, or my patients.
I really love that you say that taking care of yourself is actually a public service. You, one of our orchestra calls on our usual Monday night rehearsal times over Zoom, you mentioned that, and it really stuck with me. Because I'm obviously not a healthcare professional. The playing my part means staying home, but taking care of myself is also making sure that the healthcare system is able to take care of everyone else who can't. So it's really helpful to think about, even though I feel like I'm not doing anything, I really am.
Absolutely, yeah. And people struggle with feeling like they want to do more, and they want to do more to help. And there may be a wide range of things that any one person can do, or there may be a limited range of things that people can do, depending on their circumstance. But this is something that we can alter.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about mindfulness and your coffee and kind of just shutting everything else out. Does that translate over to music and when you're playing your violin?
Absolutely, yeah. I do spend a fair amount of time in yoga and meditation, but listening to music and playing music, I think, are my earliest forms of mindfulness practice. And as I've gotten into yoga and meditation over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been able to bring that to my practice room in a way that I think not only helps my playing, but really helps my overall well-being. I really find, and I'm sure this is true for all musicians, that it's one of the few things, practicing is one of the few things that can fully absorb my attention. When I'm focused on learning a piece of music, everything else in my mind is kind of at bay. And so I've been trying to be much more deliberate over the last couple of years in thinking about sort of scanning my body, listening to my breath, noticing where I might hold tension. And I try to think, when I'm practicing, I try to think about, well, for me, sort of the thing that I'm striving for is to make the best sound that I can make, right? And so really tuning my attention to exactly what's going on between my bow and my strings. It brings my attention to such a granular level. And that's something that anybody at any stage of playing can do. And that'd be good for their playing, and I think good for their body and good for their soul. I think about something that a teacher of mine said recently that I found really inspiring, and I think kind of threads all of this together really nicely. She was saying, she was trying to encourage, it was a group class, and she was encouraging all of us, regardless of what level of playing we're at, to think about how when we're playing music, we're always reaching towards the transcendent. We're reaching to create an experience that's bigger than ourselves. And she said, every time you pick up your instrument to play, no matter what you're practicing, whether it's like the simplest scale or the most complicated piece, remember that you're reaching for something that's bigger than yourself. And I think that's such an important thing to think about right now, when we feel so alone at times, to use music as a way to connect to the larger world. For me, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Well, that fits in perfectly with what we do at Longwood Symphony, right? We play concerts, we play music, but there's almost like a higher purpose of working with our community partners and raising money for all the different healthcare and education and social justice nonprofits. So you've been in the Longwood Symphony for how many years?
3 years now.
3 years.
I played in another orchestra a longer time ago, another community orchestra a longer time ago. And I'm having a completely different experience with this orchestra. I never expected to have so much fun. And people are pretty hilarious. There's that, They're incredibly smart, incredibly talented. So I've never been, and I work with smart people and I work with talented people. So that's not new, but there's something about the union of the joy that they experience in their music playing and the clear passion that they have for their work in science or medicine. That creates some kind of synergy that I just think is pretty magical. So every time I'm in rehearsal, I'm thinking, I can't believe I get to be here. So it's pretty sad not to be having that experience right now, but I do look forward to that continuing.
I don't even play in the orchestra, and I feel the same way. Every time I hear the orchestra play, I think I'm so lucky to be a part of this.
I mean, I really think that, well, I'll actually tell you kind of a funny story. My son plays the violin. He's a very good violinist. And the night that I went to audition, this was before you were the ED, Nick, to me, why don't you come for an audition right before the rehearsal, and if you are accepted, then you can just stay for the rehearsal. So I left my son at home alone that night, and I said, I'll probably be home early, but if they let me in, I'll be home later. So I called him up after Ronnie said, sure, join us. And I called him up and I was like, honey, I'm going to be late. I'm really surprised they let me in. And he said, so am I. So that's I just have this feeling of like, I feel so lucky that I'm here with these people.
Well, we are glad that it was a successful audition, and obviously really glad to have you as part of the orchestra, and also very grateful to you for doing this today. Are there any other final thoughts, anything that you'd like to just kind of say to anyone who might be watching?
We don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. It's likely to go on in some form for a while. So I would just want to remind people to continue to take really good care of themselves and find a way to play something. Even if people who are watching, even if there are people who are watching who aren't musicians, maybe now's the time to learn something, to take an opportunity to have an online lesson. I think a lot about, for me, when I start to practice each day, I start with a long and slow bow stroke. And I think about the slow bow stroke as like a really deep breath. And we need to keep doing that, and I think we need to do that every day to rejuvenate ourselves, because we're going to be fighting this fight for a while. And we have to stay strong.